Okay, well, my life began in the winter of 1973. I was born as the seventh child of, eventually there would be 9 of us, to Dennis and Grace Griffin. We lived in Providence and had 5 girls, 4 boys in my family. So grew up, there was never a dull moment around the Griffin household. Loved all of the goings on. But being number 7, with genetics of smaller growth patterns, shorter growth patterns, meant that at every stage going through my growing up years, I was the shortest, I was the smallest of my age group. And I always felt like the little schoolboy. I felt like the little inadequate kid in the crowd. So I showed up for first day at kindergarten and looked around, and everybody looked so old and felt so old, and I felt so intimidated. But worked my way through, and at every stage I felt like the little schoolboy. That little schoolboy mentality carried through all the way up into high school, because I was short and I didn't really grow until the end of my junior year and through my senior year and even into my mission. And so I always felt inadequate in physical ways, but the Lord was very good to me, and He blessed me with a drive to do really well with school. Problem was in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I didn't do great. I didn't get great grades. And then I had a counselor tell me, hey, starting next year, these grades are going to count towards your graduation. And so he noticed in me that I felt inadequate, and he said, stop feeling so intimidated by everybody else and just be yourself and be happy with who you are and do well on your grades, because you're capable of way better than what you've done. That turned out to be a really defining moment for me, because I started my freshman year in high school realizing every grade is now going to count on my transcript towards potential university scholarships and admission and all of that. And so I focused really, really hard on working on the things that I had control over and not worrying about my size. And that was a good transition for me, to go from feeling intimidated and feeling like a little schoolboy to feeling like somebody who could actually succeed. That carried all the way through high school, and I was able to graduate with a perfect GPA and be one of, there were many of us back in that day who did that. There were 7 of us who were valedictorians that year. But that opened all kinds of doors for me down the road. Unfortunately, the little schoolboy mentality still lingered as I went into the MTC, as I ended up in the mission field, as I came home and went to college. And so I've decided that I'll forever be the little schoolboy. But I'm okay with it now, whereas before, growing up, it was very intimidating and almost debilitating at times. But I'm okay being the little schoolboy and being inadequate in certain settings and trusting in the Lord. One day, I was sitting in seminary at Mountain Crest High School at the Hiram LES Seminary. I was a sophomore, so I was 16 years old, and my teacher that year, it was the Doctrine and Covenants year, and my teacher was Brother Courtney Rasmussen, who also happened to be my brother-in-law. He had married my oldest sister, Dana. And Court was a very dynamic teacher in that setting, and I loved learning about the scriptures from him, and he brought them to life for me. And one day, I remember sitting there as he was teaching a lesson in section 42, of all places, and I just remember looking at him and watching and thinking, that's what I want to do when I grow up. I want his profession. I want to do what my brother-in-law, Brother Rasmussen, does. And so that started me on a trajectory, starting at age 16, to say, I'd like to be a seminary teacher. So I started talking to people and finding out, well, what does a person need to do? And I found out that there's no degree, that you just have to get a bachelor's degree, and then you have to graduate from institute, and you have to take the seminary teaching courses, and then do some practicum teaching and student teaching. And if everything went well, you'd get hired. But for most people, it doesn't work out. And so everybody said, well, make sure you get a degree in something that will be able to provide for a family, because chances generally aren't in your favor. And so I stopped and thought about that. Okay, what am I interested in? What classes at school are the most engaging for me? And I loved my math classes, my science classes. I loved the whole creative design in a left brain sort of a way. So that led me to pursue a degree when I came home from my mission in electrical and computer engineering. And I went to all that work, and I loved engineering, but at the end of the day, I really wanted to be a seminary teacher because that's where my heart was. I had, during my junior and senior year in college, I had an internship with an electrical engineering job, and I student taught seminary for those same 2 years. And my wife would be able to tell me the minute I walked in the door if I had come from seminary or if I had come from my electrical engineering internship. And I asked her once, I said, how do you know? And she said, it's all over your face. When you come home from seminary, you're smiling, you're happy, you feel light, you talk to me. She said, when you come home from your electrical engineering job, you have a furrowed brow, you look worried, you're thinking deeply. It's like you're solving a problem, which I was. I was still working on issues from work and how I could figure out a design to fix the problems I was working on. And that created an interesting scenario for us, because when I graduated with my electrical engineering degree, I got a job offer for that industry, and it turned out that I got a job offer for the seminary job. And we looked at the numbers, and it was a 35 to 45%, depending on the two job offers in electrical engineering. It was significantly more money being offered on the engineering side compared to the seminary side. And that caused me to pause, and I sat down with my wife and said, Kiplin, what do we do? Should we do the seminary or the electrical engineering? And she just looked at me very calmly and she said, you already know what we're going to do. And I said, what do you mean? She said, how do you feel when you're teaching? And I said, I feel alive. I feel happy. I feel excited. I love that. But I also like the electrical engineering. She said, but it doesn't feed your soul. It doesn't make you feel as fulfilled as the seminary. And I said, you're right. And she said, money isn't everything. The Lord will provide for us. He'll take care of our needs as long as we pay our tithing and generous offerings and keep the commandments that He's asked us to do. We don't need to worry about the money. We'll have enough to take care of our needs. And that was a defining moment when I realized she's right. So I turned down the different offers for electrical engineering and went with a much lower salary but a much higher reward of a career in church education. I want to tell you about my first 24 hours in Brazil. I loved the MTC. I loved the time that I got to spend there. I went into the MTC on December 16th of 1992. And so I was there over the Christmas holiday, and we had three apostles in 4 days during that Christmas break, and it was delightful. And by the time we got about halfway through the MTC, everybody in our district and in our group was just itching to get out of the MTC and get down to Brazil and start doing the work, even though we were very new with the language and learning the programs of how to be a missionary. We just wanted to get out there. Well, the day finally came when we got to leave and fly down to Brazil. And I had been praying ever since I was a deacon. I had a lesson in a deacon's quorum up in Providence in Cache Valley. And our teacher shared with us the idea that God is not bound by time and that he has everything in front of Him at once. That thought just fascinated me. And so I started figuring out ways that I could maybe apply that. And one of those ways that I came up with was, I can start praying for things in my future that I can prepare for them, and that the Lord will maybe answer those blessings that I asked for early on. And one of the things that I prayed for was, starting at age 12, I started praying for my sweetheart, whoever she was. I didn't know who she was, but I knew God knew who I was going to marry. And I knew that it wasn't a soulmate kind of a thing, but I knew that somewhere out there in this big wide world was a young woman who was one day going to be my wife. And so I was praying for her on occasion, starting at age 12, that she would be protected and directed and be able to build talents and abilities and skills that would bless our family in the future. And same for me as well. Well, one of the other things I had been praying for since age 12 was for my trainer. I'd heard horror stories about some missionaries getting into the field and having trainers that were just not ideal. And I didn't want that. I wanted to take advantage of every day of my mission to the greatest degree possible, and I knew that I would need a good trainer to help me get off to a good start. So at age 12, I was praying, asking Heavenly Father, bless me with a trainer who is on fire, who loves the work, and who can get me off to a really good start. Well, all of those prayers got answered times 10, because I got one of the best trainers in all the world. Elder Brian Pratt. He was from Idaho, and he was related to Parley P. Pratt, and he was a fireball. And he got me when I arrived in the area there in Bairro Alto, on the outskirts of Curitiba, Brazil, as the member of the ward who came and picked me up in a van with Elder Pratt. As he drove into the area, I looked around and I saw the poverty. I saw the dirt streets and the shacks and the junk, the garbage all over the place in certain piles and certain parts of the streets. And I thought, man, this is a really, really scary neighborhood. Well, it turned out we lived right in the middle of it. I didn't know that. I thought we were just driving through it, but that was our area. And I was a little intimidated. So we got to the apartment, and this member dropped us off, and I remember taking our bags and going into this cinder block walled and tin roofed apartment with cement floors and sparse furnishings. And Elder Pratt said, okay, you can put your bags right there. We can open them up later on. Are you hungry? I said, yeah, a little bit. And he threw a banana at me and said, do you want some bread too? And I said, no. And he said, okay, we have 6 discussions tonight. And it was already 6 o'clock. And I said, how's that possible? He said, well, we're going on divisions, and you're going to teach 3 of them, and I'm going to teach 3. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, we're a little bit late, so we're going to have to walk fast because the church is about a mile away, up a hill. It's called Bairro Alto, the suburb that is high, for a reason, because the church was way up on top and we were living down near the river. And so he fell to his knees, and so I followed suit, and he says, I'll offer the prayer. And I'll never forget that prayer. He thanked Heavenly Father for my safe arrival, and he told Heavenly Father that we were going to go, and he named off different families by name. And he said, and we ask for thy angels to go before our face to prepare the way, and for the Spirit to go into these homes before we get there to prepare and open hearts for the messages that we need to share, and please unloose our tongues to be able to say what we need to say. And I remember that being a very powerful introduction to missionary work. Elder Pratt kneeling down and calling down angels and the Spirit and the power of heaven. And I felt, oh, this is for real. This is game time. We're on. So we left and then walked the mile up, and the farther we walked, the more in awe I became, thinking, wow, this is a different place. It felt like a different planet to me. We got to the chapel, and there were 2 men standing there, and he said, that's João, you're going to go with him, and I'm going to go with this other person. And I said, Elder Pratt, I can hardly speak Portuguese, and I'm going to be teaching discussions. He says, well, you're going to teach 2 first discussions, and you're going to do a follow-up to first discussion. So read 3 Nephi 11 and share your thoughts with that family. And João will help you. He's very good. He goes out with this. And he said, by the way, we go on splits almost every night, so get used to it. And I swallowed hard, and we had a little prayer with the four of us, and then we split and went on divisions. And I thought, hey, I can do this with faith. I don't remember much of what I said, and I don't know that many people understood much of what I said. But I do remember the Spirit of the Lord being there and comforting me and guiding me. But I felt totally overwhelmed by the enormity of 2 years of having to deal with this new culture. I was still getting over jet lag, and I'm a motion sick kind of a person. I get sick on a swing set or a merry-go-round, let alone the airplane ride down, and I wasn't feeling very well. And that night, got home, quickly unpacked some bags. We said our prayers, and I got out the sheets, put it on the bed, and laid down in the bed, and there was a really, really nasty smell. And I said, "Ooh, Elder Pratt, what is that smell?" And he informed me that his companion before me, a native companion, had never fully been potty trained. And so the mattress that I was sleeping on was filled with all of those lovely smells. And I couldn't stand it. So he promptly went to sleep, but I laid there, and it's in the middle of their summer when I got there in February. And so it's hot. And remember, it's a tin roof with cinder block walls with airspace all the way around. And there are a lot of bugs because it's a very humid environment there. And here I lay in the middle of the night, 11 o'clock at night. I can hear Elder Pratt sleeping across the room. And I've got the sheet tucked neatly against my chin because I don't want any of the smell from the bed. But then I hear all of the mosquitoes coming for my face. And I was constantly swatting them, and it was so bad I stuck the sheet over my head, but I couldn't stand that smell, so I brought the sheet back down. I didn't know what to do other than I just sat there kind of weeping, thinking, oh, for the MTC again. I wish I could go back to the MTC. It was so great. And there I had wanted to get out of there and get down to the mission field. And after doing this horrible back and forth with the sheet, I don't know what time it was probably around midnight, I finally rolled out of bed and knelt down on that cement floor, and I poured my heart out to God, and I said, I can't do this. I'm exhausted. I don't feel well. What have I gotten myself into? 2 years of this? I can't deal with these bugs and these smells in this culture, and I still feel sick. And no answer came. But I was able to finally fall asleep that next day for lunch, because lunch is your big meal when you eat with members. We went into a house, and I said, what's that smell? And Elder Pratt said, oh, that's beans and rice. We eat that every day. And I was nauseous. I love rice, but I hated beans, black beans especially. And we went in, and this dear sister with a couple of little kids, she had, you could tell, sacrificed to make this lovely meal for us. And just looking at those beans and smelling it made my stomach turn. And I turned to Elder Pratt and I said, what do I do? And he said, just eat a little bit. So I piled my plate full of rice and a little bit of beans, and I did everything I could to not throw up. Finished eating, he shared a message, we left, and my stomach was just churning. It was just turning. We got out to the road, and I ended up throwing up. And I said, Elder, I can't do this. 2 years of that kind of meal, I can't do it. He said, well, do this. Just try eating just the rice and the salads and forget the beans. And so that worked out great until the first zone conference, which was roughly two weeks later, when Presidente Oliveira asked me, he said, how are you doing? In Portuguese, of course, and in my broken Portuguese, I told him, I'm doing great in a lot of ways, but I'm really struggling with the food. And he said, talk to me about that. So I explained that I'm not eating beans because they just make me sick. And I thought I was going to get sympathy from him, but I didn't. He said, Elder Griffin, you're in Brazil, and the Brazilians eat beans and rice, and you're going to eat beans and rice. I said, okay, I'll keep trying, but I'll probably keep throwing them up. And he said, you won't. I'm going to give you a blessing. I'll help you. And he did. And that was an interesting experience because I started eating beans and rice and actually enjoying them. And now it's one of my favorite meals. So on my birthday, when I get to pick whatever the dinner is for birthday, I generally pick beans and rice because I love it now. So that's a great turning point for my life moving forward, to realize that God can actually help you with things, even taste, and things that before are repulsive can actually become really good. Now back to my first 24 hours. Elder Pratt was the zone leader, and that after that first full day in the area, I was overwhelmed. I was exhausted, I was sick, weak, hungry, not doing well, and very discouraged and very frustrated. And he had to go to the church to call in, or for the missionaries in the zone to call in their numbers, and then for him to call them into the APs. And he said, Elder Griffin, you can study Portuguese or the lessons in the clerk's office while I go into the bishop's office and do this, because it was just us in the chapel. I went into the chapel and went and sat down at the piano, and I played the piano, and I opened up that hymn book, and I started playing hymns like I Need Thee Every Hour, and Nearer My God to Thee, and Where Can I Turn for Peace, and Oh My Father. And that for me became this opportunity. I basically poured my heart out on that piano there in the chapel as I sung those hymns in Portuguese and then in English. And I just wept and let the Lord know that He knows I'm weak, and I felt weak, but I would put my complete trust in Him to know that I'm not a very sharp instrument, but whatever I've got, I'm going to swallow my pride, and I'm going to do everything I can to be an instrument in Thy hands to do whatever work Thou hast for me in this mission over the next 2 years. And I knew it was going to be hard. And then I went into the bathroom to wash my face after my major cry fest. And in that moment, I felt washing over me this glorious feeling of, you're not forsaken. I'm going to walk with you, and I'll be with you. It won't be easy, but I'll be with you. And I'm going to be shaping you and guiding you and directing you through somewhat very difficult circumstances at times, and glorious blessings at others. So that was a powerful turning point for me. The mission didn't get easier, but it became more doable, because for the first time in that difficult setting, I knew that I wasn't alone. And I don't mean alone just having a companion. I knew I wasn't alone, that the Lord was walking with us, and we did have His angels around about us to bear us up. When I went out into the mission field, I had a pretty healthy dose of self-confidence in certain regards, certain respects. I thought I had some things figured out, but consistently I kept meeting person after person after person who would teach me lessons that I would never forget, and that have become a part of who I am today. There's not a day that goes by that I am not blessed in one way or another because of incredible people who have no idea that they had these kinds of effects on me. I'll just share a couple of examples. Sebastian was an older gentleman in his late 70s that Elder Pratt and I had found through a zone activity in our area, where we had clapped at everybody's gate at the lower part of our area and invited them to come up to our chapel and to watch a movie using a reel-to-reel projector of the old movie called Where Jesus Walked in Portuguese. And we hired a school bus, rented a school bus to pick up the people, to take them up there, and then to bring them back. We filled that school bus twice. It was a huge turnout. Sebastian was one of those people who accepted that invitation. We ended up teaching him, and he wanted to get baptized. And we were so excited because he had a large family, and he was so positive. He came to church, and you could just see this man lighting up. And he told us of his history, that he had had some pretty serious struggles early on in life, and he had smoked quite a bit and had issues with drugs and a little bit of gang activity, but in his latter years had really calmed down and tried to find true happiness and true peace, especially because he wanted that for his children and his grandchildren. And he was so grateful that we had found him and that he was able to take the discussions, and he accepted to be baptized, and we were very excited about that. And then we got word that he was in the hospital 2 days before his baptism. And Elder Pratt and I instantly went to the hospital, and we found Sebastian, and he was sitting up in bed, and he was breathing very, very heavily. He didn't look good, and we knew he was not doing well. And we went in, and Elder Pratt did most of the talking, of course, because I was still working on my Portuguese. And he asked him how he was doing, and Sebastian said, "Not good. I'm in a lot of pain, and the doctors are telling me that I'm not going to make it." That he had major issues with his heart and lungs, and they said that it was a matter of a very few days before he would probably pass away. And Elder Pratt asked him if he would like a blessing, because we had taught him about priesthood blessings, and he said, "Yes, I would." And then Elder Pratt, being the good trainer, I guess, that he was, he pulled out his keychain and grabbed the oil, and he stepped over to Sebastian, asked the full name, and he proceeded to anoint Sebastian. And I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I knew what that meant. That meant that Elder Pratt was expecting me to give the blessing, and I did not feel capable. He finished the anointing and then turned to me, and I asked him for the wording, and he had me just get out my white Bible, my white handbook, and I set it there so I could see the Portuguese words, because I had never done this yet in Brazil. And we laid our hands on Sebastian's head, and I'll never forget the first thing that happened were very, very clear words to let him go, to let Sebastian go. His mission was finished, and he was in a lot of pain, and his timing had come, and it was right. But he was one of our baptisms, and he was an adult male nonetheless, which is a big deal in the mission field. And I didn't want to let him go. I wanted to baptize him. So here's little Elder Griffin in very broken Portuguese, hands on his head with Elder Pratt's hands on top of mine. And I'm bumbling my way through this prayer, promising him that he's going to get better, and that the pain's going to go away, and that he's going to get baptized, and that we're going to be able to teach all of his family, and there's going to be huge success. And the entire time, these words just kept coming to my mind: let him go, let him go. And I didn't let him go. And we finished, and Sebastian looked at me, and he asked me just one simple question: really? Really? He was saying, "Is that really what's going to happen?" And I had no confidence in my response, but I outwardly said, yeah, you're going to be fine. We're going to baptize you, Sebastian. And he looked sad. He looked lost. And Elder Pratt looked disappointed. We walked out of the hospital, and Elder Pratt said, "Elder Griffin, did you really feel like he was going to live?" And I said, "No, I felt like he's going to die." And he says, "That's what I felt too. Why didn't you let him go?" Sebastian died 2 days later, the day he was supposed to be baptized. And his family, when we went and visited them on Sunday, the day after, they said that the last thing he kept saying was, "Where are the elders? Call the elders. I want to see the elders." That experience has kind of, not in a bad way, but in a good way, has haunted me ever since then. And it's changed the way I look at giving blessings. And instead of going into them thinking, what do I want out of this person? More of an approach of, what does the Lord want for this person? That was a failure in that instance, but a victory because of what I learned from Sebastian. And I know that Sebastian forgave me on the other side, and I can't wait for the day that I can meet him on the other side and give him a hug and ask in person for his forgiveness for not following the Spirit. Another person that I never got to meet in Brazil that blessed my life was a widow that lived in Vila Tebas, which is right across the river from Tarumã and Bairro Alto, where I was serving. Her bishop shared an experience with a couple of us elders at a zone conference as we were working on some dishes after the luncheon. He said that he had gone to visit this old widow, and she lived in the river bottoms, which means she lives in a shack thrown together with scrap wood and scrap metal. And she had very little to her, as far as possessions are concerned, very little to her name. She had a little mattress on the floor, and it's a dirt floor. She had 2 sawhorses and 3 strips of wood for a table. She had a propane tank and a screw on top for her stove, a little basin for her sink that she would have to go and get water out of a well, and a little stump for her chair. And the bishop said after the missionaries baptized her that he went to visit her, and he was just appalled by her living conditions and thought, we're going to help her. One piece of furniture at a time. We're going to replace this old junky furniture, and then we're going to find a way to get her out of the river bottoms into an apartment up in the city. And so he stood up in sacrament meeting, he said, that following Sunday, and announced to the ward, we have a family in our ward who's in need of a small, simple kitchen table. So if any of you have a kitchen table that you could spare and donate, please come see me, because there's a family that could really use it. Well, after the meeting, the bishop said that he got a knock on his door, and there stood this widow. And she said, Bishop, I heard your announcement about the family that is without a kitchen table. And she said, that broke my heart, to picture a family having to eat without a table. And she then proceeded to ask the bishop to come to her house and pick up her table, 2 sawhorses and 3 strips of wood, 3 slats of wood. And she said, it's not a great table, but it'll at least provide a place where this family can gather for their meals and enjoy a meal together every day. And she said, I feel so blessed. I don't need a table. I'll eat my food in my lap. The bishop took that widow in his arm and gave her a big hug and told her that the table was intended for her. And she just wept and said, I don't need the table. I feel so richly blessed with what I have. I never met that woman. I don't even know her name. But she changed my life, and she helped me look at possessions differently and helped me see that it doesn't matter what you have. You can always try to get more. But if you look at what you have as an incredible blessing from God, then you're far more likely to be willing to lift those around who may not be as privileged or as well off as you. So I'll be forever grateful to this woman. Another man that I met in the mission field that changed my life, he and his family, they were fairly middle class as far as Brazil is concerned. They lived in an okay house. It wasn't a shack. He worked at the local water treatment plant along with his brother, who wasn't a member of our church. And his brother decided he wanted to take the discussion. So we set up a time. We showed up at João's house, which is the name of the member, the brother that was a member of the church. We showed up, and his brother wasn't there. He said, elders, he had to go to work, got called into work last minute. So Elder Bauer, my companion, and I said, okay, no problem. Well, we'll reschedule. But our president has asked us that we never leave a house without first sharing a scripture and leaving a blessing. So can we share a scripture? And João and his family, his wife, said yes. And I'm sure we shared a great thought. I can't even remember what it was. And we said a prayer, and I'm sure it was great. We got up to leave, and João turned to his wife and nodded, and she came back with a grocery sack with 2 loaves of freshly made bread. And I looked at their little children. The 3 littlest children were very skinny. This family wasn't doing well. And we knew a little bit of the story that João and his brother at the water treatment plant were a little worried they were going to lose their job because they were cutting back and things weren't going very well for them. And he was really afraid they were going to lose their job. And João didn't know what he was going to do. And these kids looked really hungry, and it broke my heart. And I didn't know what to do. So I said, João, thank you for offering to give us this bread, but we don't need it as much as your children. Please feed them instead. We didn't want to be rude, but didn't quite know how to do that. And he said, no, please take the bread. And I said, I thought I was inspired. I said, hey, how about if we all just sit down right now and eat the bread together? And he said, no, we want you to take the bread. I didn't understand. I said, João, please, let's just eat it all together. And then he grabbed my hand and squeezed it on the bag. And he was a very large man, way bigger than me. And he said, with a tear running down his cheek, he said, Elder Griffin, you don't understand. My family needs the blessings of the Lord now more than we've ever needed them before. Will you please take the bread? And at that point, my heart changed. And I realized, oh, yes, you're right. I would be honored for us to take the bread as long as we can offer one more word of prayer. And he said, I would like that. And I remember that prayer because I poured my heart out to God for this dear family, that they would have the richest blessings of the Lord poured out upon their head and upon their home. Gratefully, João did not lose his job in that instance, and I haven't had any contact with them since then. But if they kept that level of faith going, I have no question that God has continued to watch over that dear family, and I'll be forever grateful for the lesson they taught me about what it means to make a sacrifice in those moments of greatest need, to give up the very thing that you feel like you're lacking in total faith. I had finished my PhD in instructional technology. I was teaching institute in Logan, Utah, adjacent to Utah State University. We were living in Providence. Everything was perfect. I had 100% job satisfaction. The central office of seminaries and institutes had asked me a year before to develop an online seminary program and pilot some different options because they didn't have anything available yet. And I was at 100% job satisfaction. I loved the students I was working with, the faculty I worked with, working with pre-service students, people who wanted to become seminary teachers. I was teaching them, developing the online seminary program. Everything was perfect. When one day Wayne Dimmock, the institute director, came and said, hey, Tyler, you're going to have 2 visitors in your classroom today from BYU. And I kind of chuckled at Brother Dimmock, and I said, you know that I have no interest in ever going to BYU. Just because I finished my PhD, I'm staying with seminaries and institutes. And he said, I know, but they asked if there was anybody else who had finished their PhD, and I told them you had, and so they're going to come and observe. So later that morning, David Whitchurch and Frank Judd from the Ancient Scripture Department in Provo were sitting in my room watching. And afterwards, they came to my office and sat across from me, and I'll never forget the moment when David Whitchurch said, So Tyler, would you ever have any interest in teaching at BYU? I smiled because Brother Dimmock had told me to be very nice to them, and I was very cordial. I smiled and I opened my mouth to say, I have no interest in leaving my job with seminaries and institutes. I'm happy here at the institute, and I'm not interested at all in going to BYU. My mouth was open, ready to say I have no interest, when the Lord gave me a very strong impression of 4 words followed by an exclamation mark in an instant. And the 4 words were, don't close any doors. And I was so confused. My mouth was open, and I kind of bumbled along and said, I've never seriously considered that before. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what are you doing with me? What is going on here? I have no interest in leaving seminaries. Well, they set up they set up an opportunity for me to come down to Provo to observe classes. I didn't want to go, but I kept getting this impression, don't close any doors. So I went and I observed, and I had a great experience. It was wonderful. I thought maybe the Lord just needed me to experience these things to learn, so I could be a better teacher at the Institute, or a better pre-service trainer, or better with online seminary. And then they asked, okay, now, do you want to come back down some other day when you can guest lecture in 2 or 3 classes? And I thought, I don't want to, but you can probably guess what the answer was. Don't close any doors. And I kept thinking, what is going on? I've got 100% job satisfaction. I've got everything I could ever want for my family and my career. I don't want to walk away. I don't want to leave this. And one thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and at each phase it was don't close any doors until here comes a job offer from BYU. And we had to make a decision. And we made it a matter of serious prayer and fasting for me and my wife and all of our children who were old enough to fast. And the answer came back from every single one of us that the Lord wanted our family in Provo, even though we didn't know why. And so we accepted the job, and we put our house on the market, and that was in April. And we told the realtor we need to sell the house quickly because we want to get down to, actually it was in March, because we wanted to get down in June or July into Provo to settle in before the school year would start at the end of August. The home didn't sell. Well, we kept lowering the price and we kept doing improvements, and the home didn't sell. We were 2 weeks into August, a couple weeks away from the start of school, and we still hadn't sold the home, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And my high priest group leader, Todd Moon, came up to me one Sunday at church and he said, hey Tyler, I've told my parents about your situation. They live down in Orem, Kay and Maven Moon, and they would like to invite you to live in their basement during the weekdays, and then you can drive home for the weekends if you'd like to be with your family until you can sell the home. I wanted to sell the house. I wanted the Lord to give us this blessing because I felt like He had inspired us to take this job. But things were not progressing the way I thought they should be progressing. But the Lord answered our prayer through these delivering angels, Kay and Mava Moon, to provide an opportunity for my family to learn some things we could have never learned in any other way because of that distance during fall semester of 2010, when I had to drive down, stay in their basement, teach all week, and then come home for the weekend. That was hard, but the Moons made it sweet, and they were every bit a ministering and a delivering and a guardian angel as any angel unseen could be. And they changed our situation from bitter to sweet, and they weren't the only ones. There were so many people who chipped in and helped us through that issue. A little simple thing was we had put all of our major stuff into storage, which means doing that back in March and April means that we put all of our Christmas decorations in first, and they were impossibly buried at this point. So the first part of December, when we were waiting for the sale of our home to go through mid-December, we didn't have any Christmas decorations of any kind. And the Ward Relief Society president up there in Providence, Dina Mendenhall, knew that my wife, Kiplin, really, really loves decorating and loves Christmas especially. And so she arranged with me to get a key. And we came home from church that first Sunday of December, and she and another dear sister in the ward had come into our home and brought a large tree fully decorated, and nativity and garlands and all kinds of Christmas stuff, and had decorated the house. And we came walking in, and Kiplin just broke down because this was hard on everybody, this struggle. But that moment for her was another tender mercy from the Lord to say, I have not forsaken you, and I'm with you, and I'm watching you, and I know your needs, and I know your wants and your desires, and I'll be with you through all of this. That was a sweet, sweet moment for us. And there were many of those along the way. To make a long story short, our move to BYU from seminaries and institutes, while difficult to let go of 100% job satisfaction and to let go of all that comfort zone and everything in place perfectly, and to embrace this ambiguity that was facing us down here in Provo, that was a turning point for us. And now that we've been here 7.5 years, we look back and we just shake our head and marvel at how God was able to take 100% satisfaction in all these areas and turn them into 150% satisfaction. It got so much better, and we didn't know it could, because we didn't even know what questions to ask back at that point, because we were content with what we had. And I learned a great lesson at that point to realize that the God of the universe, who holds worlds without number in his hands, he actually holds us in his heart because we're his children. And he wants good things for us. And sometimes we don't even know what to ask for, what those good things are. But if we'll just trust him and not slam doors shut that he has opened for us, then he'll walk with us through those experiences until we realize all of the incredible blessings that he has in store for us, if we'll just keep moving forward in faith. Being a father of 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls, is always a conversation starter in today's world. Most people think my wife and I are absolutely crazy. And I don't recommend that to most people. 10 children is a lot of work, and it's a lot of emotional draw, and financial and spiritual, and it stretches you in every way, shape, and form. And some people have assumed that because we have 10 children that we are big family advocates and tell everybody to have as many kids as you possibly can, and we just don't. Whenever we're asked, what is your advice on children? We say it doesn't matter what our opinion is. Our only advice is the spouse, the husband and the wife, together with the Lord, need to make those decisions, and it's nobody else's business. My wife, early on, she shared with me her feelings regarding this. She said, I only have one window, based on what we understand doctrinally, I only have one window in all of eternity where I'm going to have the opportunity to give life and bear children physically, to give them physical, mortal bodies, and to lay claim on them as my own children. I only have one window, and it's about a 20 to 25 year window, depending on when you get married and how your body and your health respond. And so she said, I don't want to have as many children as I can have. She said, I want to have as many as Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother want us to have. That's all I care about. She said, I don't want to get up to heaven and see even one child standing there saying, you agreed that you would have me as well, but then you decided not to because of the cares of the world or because of the opinions of the world. And she said, I don't want to get up there and find out that I had claim on other children that God wanted to send to us, but we didn't want to invite into our family. And so we have taken that issue very, very seriously, and it's very personal. And I will just say that every single one of those 10 children, no twins, no triplets, they're all single births. Every single one of those children were invited into our home with open hearts, with firm minds dedicated to the fact that if God was willing to give them to us, if He wanted us to have them, we would more than welcome them into our family circle and do everything we could with their help. You need, which prophet was it that said, you need heaven's help in raising heaven's child? I think it was President Hinckley. We recognized that it wasn't us who was going to be doing the raising. It was a joint effort here. And that has blessed our life, because each child, as I've held them in the labor and delivery room right after birth, it doesn't take even a second for our heart, our parent heart, to wrap around that child and to embrace them into our family circle and to be filled with the love and the light from heaven that they brought with them. Some people say, how can you possibly love them all? And how can you have time for them all? I don't know, but they brought with them a package of love and a package of resources from heaven to add to our family mix. And they didn't take away from us. They added to us, and we're forever grateful for each one of them. And my greatest experiences in life have come in the role of father and husband in the family setting. Most of them are very, very sacred in the life-shaping ways, and some of them are very personal regarding some of the struggles and some of the successes that the children have been through and that we as a family have gone through with them. The one story I will share is with Benjamin, our oldest, who a year ago today, this is the 1-year anniversary of when Kiplin and I drove him to the Salt Lake airport and dropped him off to fly out to, or down to the Guatemala MTC to begin his mission. So today is the exact halfway point of his 2 years. And leading up to Benjamin leaving, my dear wife was very emotional. She was having a hard time saying, how are we going to be able to send him off on this mission? And she was having a hard time, and I kept telling her, honey, it's going to be great. I've been on a mission, and I know how wonderful these experiences are for him, and it's great. And I was being the strong one, right? Well, the day before he left, I laid my hands on his head to give him a father's blessing. And this huge hole opened up in my heart, and the floodgates opened up, and I just wept. I could hardly get through that blessing. It took me longer than any blessing I've ever given. And my heart was just breaking, and I couldn't figure out why, because I was so happy. There was nowhere in this world I'd rather have Benjamin go than on a mission for 2 years to Central America, because that's where the prophet had called him. And that was a very difficult evening for me. And the next day when we went to the airport, my heart was just breaking. And I was smiling through those tears. And he went through the TSA checkout line, and we were standing there, and he turned around and waved one more time, and then walked down the terminal to go and wait for his flight. And I was left there feeling like my heart was just bursting. And I realized for the first time how it might feel for heavenly parents sending children down to earth, even though they're gods and we're not, and they have total control over where they are and their presence. But I got a little bit of a taste of what it's like to send a child away, knowing that the experience is needful, knowing that it's good for them, but still feeling that feeling of separation as they go off on this life journey now. My appreciation for our heavenly parents multiplied by 100 that day, and my love for Benjamin and for all of my other 9 children multiplied that day. And when we got back home, I took each one of those 9 other children into my arms, and I just held them. I loved them, and I'm forever grateful for the supernal gift of eternal marriage and eternal families. That one factor alone has the most shaping influence in my life and my happiness and my goals and my future and my appreciation to God and to our Savior Jesus Christ than any other thing, any other blessing they've given me. And I am a huge advocate of people turning to God, turning vertically for answers regarding what should I do about marriage, or what should I do about children or raising these children, rather than turning horizontally to the world's experts on how to deal with different issues. Because once again, He holds worlds without number in his hands, but we're his children, so he holds us in his heart, and he will guide us. And I'm grateful for that.